My son's fiancée mocked me in French right in front of her family, smiling sweetly, confident I was just another clueless American mother. She had no idea I understood every single word. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm a widow from Ohio, and my son Ethan is my only child. After my husband passed away years ago, Ethan became my whole world. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked long hours, saved carefully, and tried my best to give him a stable life. Watching him grow into a kind and driven man was my greatest pride. When Ethan told me he was engaged, my heart felt full. He was glowing in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me her name was Camille Laurent. He said she was elegant, intelligent, and came from a well-off family. I was nervous but excited. I wanted nothing more than to welcome her into our lives and support their future together. Our first dinner together was held at Camille's parents' home. The house was large and beautifully decorated, the kind of place that made you feel like you had to sit up straighter. Camille greeted me warmly in English, her smile polished and practiced. Her parents were polite but distant. I told myself they were just reserved people. As dinner went on, the conversation shifted. Camille began speaking in French with her parents. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was more comfortable for them. But then I noticed the way she glanced at me, her lips curling slightly as she spoke. Her parents chuckled softly. Camille laughed too, covering her mouth as if she had just shared a harmless joke. I felt something tighten in my chest. I had studied French years ago when my husband worked overseas. I never spoke it publicly because there was rarely a reason to. That night, I understood everything she said. Every careless word. Every quiet insult wrapped in polite laughter. She spoke about my clothes, calling them outdated. She joked about my small-town manners. She implied I didn't belong in that room. Each comment landed like a small cut. I kept my face calm, nodding when appropriate, lifting my glass when everyone else did. Inside, I felt a mix of shock and hurt. Ethan didn't notice a thing. He was busy talking about work, smiling proudly beside the woman he loved. I looked at my son and realized he had no idea what was happening right in front of him. That hurt more than the insults. I stayed quiet through the rest of the evening. I didn't confront her. I didn't defend myself. I simply observed. As we said our goodbyes, Camille hugged me and told me it was so nice to finally meet me. Her tone was sweet, her eyes confident. That was the moment I understood something important. Camille believed I was harmless. Invisible. Easy to dismiss. She thought silence meant ignorance. Sitting in my car afterward, hands resting on the steering wheel, I felt the first clear spark of betrayal. And I knew this was only the beginning. After that first dinner, I paid closer attention to Camille. On the surface, she was everything a future daughter-in-law should be. She spoke politely in English, always smiling, always saying the right things. When others were around, she held my hand, asked about my health, and thanked me for raising such a wonderful son. Anyone watching would have thought she adored me. But when she believed I wasn't paying attention, her tone changed. There were small moments at first. During visits, she would lean toward her parents or friends and whisper in French. Her eyes would flick toward me, then away again. Sometimes they would laugh quietly. Other times, she would sigh as if I were a burden simply for being in the room. I noticed how she straightened when Ethan entered, how her voice softened, how quickly the whispers stopped. I never reacted. I kept my posture relaxed, my expression neutral. I let her believe I was unaware. Inside, I was listening carefully. I understood every word. The comments were rarely loud or dramatic. They didn't need to be. She talked about my habits, calling them provincial. She mocked the way I asked questions, saying I was slow. Once, she described me as someone who should know her place. Each time, she spoke casually, like she was discussing the weather. I often wondered when it started. Had she disliked me from the beginning, or did it grow as she realized I wasn't impressed by money or status? I thought back to my years overseas with my husband. Learning French had been a way to survive in a foreign place, to build a life together. I never imagined that quiet skill would become something I'd need to protect myself. What hurt most was how easily she switched faces. One moment, she was kind and warm. The next, dismissive and sharp, hidden behind another language. It felt intentional. Controlled. Like she enjoyed knowing something I was supposed to be excluded from. I started noticing patterns. Whenever Ethan spoke highly of me, Camille would grow tense. When I suggested something simple, like a family dinner or a shared holiday, she would smile in English and later mock the idea in French. She didn't just disagree with me. She resented my presence. The realization came slowly, then all at once. Camille didn't see me as family. She saw me as an obstacle. A reminder of a life Ethan had before her. Something old and inconvenient that hadn't faded away on its own. I felt a deep sadness, but also clarity. This wasn't misunderstanding or cultural difference. This was contempt. Quiet, practiced, and deliberate. I knew then that speaking up too soon would only make me look bitter or jealous. So I stayed silent. I watched. I listened. And I learned exactly who Camille Laurent really was. A few weeks later, there was a larger family gathering at Camille's parents' home. More relatives were there, and the house was filled with voices and movement. I arrived in my old sedan, the same one I had driven for years. I parked carefully and reminded myself that I was there for Ethan, not for anyone else. Inside, Camille greeted me with a smile that looked perfect from a distance. She complimented my jacket and offered me a drink. Everything seemed pleasant on the surface. As the afternoon went on, people split into small groups. Ethan was pulled away into a conversation with Camille's uncle, leaving me near the kitchen. That's when I heard it. Camille stood with her parents a few feet away, speaking in French. She glanced at my shoes, then toward the window where my car was parked. She laughed softly and said my accent sounded heavy and dull. Her mother joined in, commenting that my car looked like something from another decade. Camille replied that I probably couldn't afford anything better, calling me a charity case mother who depended on her son. Her parents laughed. Not nervously. Not politely. They laughed like it was amusing and deserved. I stood still, holding my glass, my hand steady. No one noticed me listening. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I watched their faces, the ease with which they spoke about me, as if I were an object, not a person. What hurt even more came later. As the evening continued, I noticed Camille speaking quietly to Ethan. She touched his arm, leaned close, and lowered her voice. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. She told him I worried too much. That I asked too many questions. That I made things awkward. She suggested it might be better if he didn't involve me in every plan. Ethan listened. He didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He simply nodded, trusting the woman he loved. I felt a sharp ache in my chest that had nothing to do with pride. It was the realization that someone was slowly turning my son away from me, not through force, but through suggestion. Camille wasn't attacking me directly in front of him. She was planting ideas, framing me as a burden he would eventually want to escape. On the drive home, I replayed everything in my mind. The laughter. The words. The way Ethan had looked uncertain, like he was trying to balance loyalty and love. That was the moment the betrayal became clear. Camille wasn't just unkind. She was deliberate. She wanted distance between us. I understood then that staying silent wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about seeing the full picture before making a move. And that picture was darker than I had imagined. The moment Camille crossed the line happened on an ordinary afternoon. We were all sitting in the living room after lunch, coffee cups in our hands, the room quiet except for soft music in the background. Ethan stepped outside to take a phone call, leaving me alone with Camille and her parents. Camille glanced at me, then began speaking in French, her voice calm and casual. She talked about my late husband. She said I was lucky to have married him, that a man like him would never have chosen someone like me under normal circumstances. She implied I had married above my station and had spent my life benefiting from something I didn't truly deserve. Her mother nodded. Her father smiled faintly. For a brief second, the room felt very small. My husband had been a good man. We built our life together with effort and respect. Hearing his memory reduced to a joke made my hands tighten around my cup. I felt a deep sting, not just for myself, but for him. I looked at Camille. Her expression was relaxed. Confident. She truly believed she was untouchable. She believed I would never understand, never respond, never challenge her. I said nothing. That silence wasn't weakness. It was a decision. On the drive home, I realized something had shifted inside me. This was no longer about small insults or quiet cruelty. Camille had disrespected my family, my past, and a man who could no longer speak for himself. That was something I could not ignore. Still, I knew confronting her right then would only help her. She would deny everything. She would cry. She would twist the story. I would become the bitter mother-in-law she had already described me as. So I chose a different path. I began to pay closer attention to details. I noted the dates of gatherings. I remembered exactly who was present and what was said. I kept mental records of conversations, patterns, and changes in behavior. I didn't write anything down yet, but I stored everything carefully. Around Camille, I stayed calm and polite. I thanked her for invitations. I smiled at her jokes. I let her believe she was winning. Inside, I was no longer confused or hurt. I was focused. I watched how she spoke to Ethan. I observed when her tone softened and when it sharpened. I noticed how she acted differently depending on who was in the room. Each interaction confirmed what I already knew. By the time I went to bed that night, my decision was clear. I would not rush. I would not react emotionally. I would wait. Camille thought she was dealing with someone simple and unaware. She was wrong. The engagement dinner was held at an upscale restaurant in the city. Camille had chosen the place herself. Everything was carefully planned, from the seating to the menu. Family members from both sides were invited, and the room was filled with soft lighting and quiet conversation. I arrived on time, dressed simply, telling myself to stay calm and present. At first, everything seemed formal but pleasant. Camille moved from table to table, greeting guests, laughing, playing the perfect future bride. When she came to me, she kissed my cheek and thanked me for coming. Her voice was warm in English. Her smile was flawless. As the evening went on, conversations overlapped and glasses were refilled. Camille sat with her parents and several relatives across from me. She began speaking in French again, her tone louder this time, more confident. She no longer bothered to lower her voice. She spoke about mothers who do the bare minimum and expect praise. She questioned whether love alone made someone a good parent. Then she said some women hold their children back because they have nothing else in their lives. Her eyes flicked toward me as she spoke. Her relatives listened. A few nodded. Someone laughed quietly. The words cut deeper than before. This wasn't about my clothes or my background. She was questioning my worth as a mother. Everything I had given to my son. Every sacrifice. Every long night and hard choice. I felt my throat tighten. My hands trembled slightly beneath the table. I looked toward Ethan, hoping he might notice the tension, the shift in the room. He was deep in conversation with someone beside him, unaware of what was happening just a few feet away. I stayed seated for a moment longer, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Then I quietly stood, picked up my purse, and excused myself. I said I wasn't feeling well. No one stopped me. Camille glanced at me briefly, her expression unreadable. The walk to my car felt longer than usual. Once inside, I sat there with the engine off, staring straight ahead. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not there. Not like that. At home, the silence felt heavy. I replayed the evening in my mind, every word, every look. I realized something important. My silence had allowed this to continue. Not because I was weak, but because I had been patient. That night, patience turned into resolve. I told myself I would not be humiliated quietly anymore. If Camille wanted to test how far she could go, she was about to learn that silence has a limit. After the engagement dinner, I became more aware of what was happening around my son. I didn't question him directly. I didn't warn him or argue. Instead, I listened carefully when he spoke and noticed the changes in his life. Ethan began mentioning money more often. Not in a worried way, but in passing comments. He talked about covering extra expenses, adjusting his budget, and delaying things he once planned for himself. When I asked simple questions, he brushed them off, saying everything was fine. I later learned that Camille wasn't contributing much financially. She relied on Ethan for rent, travel, and daily expenses. She spoke proudly about her background, but her lifestyle was being supported by my son. She encouraged him to take on more responsibility while presenting it as a sign of commitment. I also noticed changes in Ethan's work life. He turned down a job opportunity that would have required relocation, something he had once been excited about. When I asked why, he said it wasn't the right time. Later, I overheard Camille telling someone that stability mattered more than ambition, and that certain jobs didn't fit the image she wanted. Little by little, his world was shrinking. Ethan stopped calling as often. Family dinners became less frequent. When I suggested inviting an old friend or relative to a gathering, Camille would smile and later dismiss the idea as unnecessary or uncomfortable. Anyone who questioned her plans slowly disappeared from their circle. What stood out was how carefully she framed everything. She never demanded. She suggested. She never argued. She guided. To Ethan, it looked like partnership. To me, it looked like control. I spoke with a few people who knew them well. Quiet conversations. Neutral questions. I learned that others had noticed the same patterns. Camille didn't like being challenged. She didn't like opinions that differed from hers. And she didn't like me. Despite everything, I stayed out of their decisions. I didn't interfere. I didn't warn Ethan or confront Camille. I knew that if I acted too soon, it would confirm every false story she had told about me. So I waited. I waited for a moment where the truth would reveal itself naturally. A moment where Camille's behavior would speak louder than my words. A moment where I wouldn't have to defend myself at all. I reminded myself that clarity takes time. And when it arrives, it doesn't need shouting. Wedding planning began soon after, and Camille took full control. She had strong opinions about everything. The venue had to be grand. The guest list had to be impressive. Every detail needed to reflect a certain image. Ethan agreed to most of it without hesitation. I could see the pressure building on him, but he rarely spoke about it. Camille talked openly about costs, assuming Ethan would handle them. She framed it as an investment in their future. When numbers were mentioned, she waved them away with confidence, saying things would work out. I noticed how carefully she avoided discussing limits. During planning meetings, she stayed polite with me in English. She asked for my input, then ignored it. When she switched to French, her tone changed completely. She called my opinions outdated. She referred to me as irrelevant. Once, she joked that mothers like me were temporary, that once a man married, his old life should fade. She said these things casually, almost playfully, as if they were harmless truths. I didn't react. I smiled. I nodded. I offered help when asked. I stayed quiet when ignored. My calm seemed to confuse her. She expected frustration. Maybe even anger. When it didn't come, she grew bolder. Her comments became sharper. Less careful. She spoke more freely in front of others, confident that her words were safe. She underestimated silence, mistaking it for weakness. Ethan remained focused on pleasing her. He didn't notice the shifts. Or maybe he didn't want to. I watched him stretch himself thinner, trying to meet expectations he didn't fully understand. At times, I felt invisible. But invisibility has its advantages. People reveal themselves when they think no one is listening. Camille believed she had full control. She believed I had accepted my place. She believed the future was already settled. She didn't realize that every careless word, every dismissive laugh, was adding weight to a truth she wouldn't be able to escape. She was building something fragile, piece by piece, unaware that it would eventually collapse under its own design. And I continued to wait. The family meeting was held at Camille's parents' home, with everyone seated around a long table. Papers were spread out, numbers discussed, and decisions waiting to be made. The atmosphere felt tense but controlled. Ethan sat beside Camille, focused and quiet. As the conversation continued, Camille began speaking in French again. This time, she didn't lower her voice at all. She looked around the table, then glanced at me. She questioned why I was even part of the discussion. She said mothers like me didn't belong in planning decisions and only complicated things. Her tone was sharp, confident, final. There was a brief pause. No one reacted. Her parents remained still, as if they agreed. I took a slow breath and placed my hands on the table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I looked directly at Camille and spoke in French, repeating her words back to her exactly as she had said them. The room went completely silent. Camille's face changed instantly. The color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her parents stared at me, stunned. No one moved. I continued speaking in French, calmly and clearly. I told her I had understood every comment she had made from the beginning. Every insult. Every quiet laugh. I explained that silence did not mean ignorance. It meant patience. Ethan turned toward me slowly, confusion and shock written across his face. He looked at Camille, then back at me, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. Camille tried to speak, but her confidence was gone. Her voice shook as she switched back to English, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the damage was already done. Her parents avoided eye contact. The truth had been spoken out loud. I didn't accuse. I didn't argue. I simply stated facts. I said I had stayed quiet out of respect, not fear. And that respect had been tested long enough. The balance in the room had shifted. Camille was no longer in control. Her words, once hidden, now stood in the open. And there was no way to take them back. I sat back in my chair and remained silent again. This time everyone understood why. After the silence settled, I spoke again, calmly and without emotion. I explained that I had understood every French comment from the very beginning. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told the truth as it was. I listed the moments clearly. The jokes about my background. The comments about my worth as a mother. The way Camille spoke about my late husband. I explained how she laughed with her parents while assuming I was unaware. I described how she encouraged distance between Ethan and me, slowly and carefully, through suggestion rather than force. No one interrupted me. Ethan stared at the table, his hands clenched. As I spoke, I could see the pieces coming together in his mind. The missed calls. The pressure. The way his life had narrowed without him realizing why. This wasn't one incident. It was a pattern. Camille tried to respond. She said I was exaggerating. She said I misunderstood her tone. She claimed cultural differences and stress. Her words came quickly, but they lacked control. The confidence she once carried was gone. When Ethan asked her directly if she had spoken about me that way, she hesitated. That pause said more than any argument could. I didn't attack her. I didn't insult her back. I simply said I expected respect, and that respect had not been given. I said I stayed silent because I didn't want to create conflict, but silence had allowed things to go too far. Camille looked around the room, searching for support. Her parents remained quiet. No one stepped in to defend her. The truth was no longer hidden behind language. Ethan finally spoke. His voice was steady but strained. He said he felt manipulated. He said he needed time to think. That was enough to break the illusion Camille had built so carefully. The meeting ended without shouting. No doors slammed. No dramatic exits. People stood slowly, gathering their things, avoiding eye contact. The engagement, once celebrated, felt fragile and uncertain. As I left the house, I felt no triumph. Only clarity. The truth had done what it needed to do. Some things, once revealed, cannot be repaired. After everything was revealed, the engagement didn't survive. Camille left, quietly at first, then completely. The wedding was cancelled. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public scene. It ended simply, because the truth had spoken for itself. Ethan and I sat together in the quiet of our living room the next day. He apologized, softly but sincerely. He admitted he hadn't seen what was happening, hadn't understood how much Camille had manipulated him. His pride was gone, replaced with humility. I listened, letting him speak, letting him reflect on the choices he had almost made. I didn't scold him. I didn't make him feel small. He needed to learn, and he needed to see for himself. What mattered was that he understood now. Camille's absence left a strange emptiness. Part of me had expected anger, or satisfaction, or some sense of triumph. Instead, there was calm. I realized revenge doesn't have to be loud or cruel. It doesn't need to be public or humiliating. True strength is quiet. It comes from truth, from patience, from standing firm without losing your dignity. I chose forgiveness, but not silence. I didn't need to prove anything to Camille. I didn't need to speak to her, contact her, or explain myself. The truth had done its work. She had misjudged me because I had been calm. She assumed silence meant weakness. She was wrong. In the weeks that followed, life returned to a steady rhythm. Ethan and I spent more time together. We repaired the closeness that had been stretched thin. We talked about what mattered: family, honesty, respect. He seemed more grounded, more aware of people's intentions, and more careful with his trust. I also reflected on myself. I had endured humiliation, mockery, and betrayal. I had watched someone try to undermine my life with words and subtle manipulation. But I hadn't lost myself. I hadn't let anger control my actions. I had stayed patient, observing, and preparing. And in the end, that patience had been my greatest ally. There was a powerful lesson in the experience: cruelty can only affect those who let it. Silence is not weakness. Observing, listening, and acting with purpose is far stronger than reacting in anger. Camille had thought she could control the narrative. She had assumed that mockery and charm could hide her true character. She had underestimated me. She had misread patience for submission. Now, with the wedding cancelled and the deceit exposed, I felt lighter. I didn't carry resentment. I didn't carry revenge. I carried clarity, self-respect, and the knowledge that standing firm in truth is the most effective way to protect yourself. In the end, dignity had won. Quietly. Firmly. Without the need for confrontation or cruelty. And that was victory enough.